Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. We're excited that you've joined us to learn more about wildfire detection in multifamily communities. My name is Neil Spungen. I am the founder of Detect Wildfires, and our primary focus is to bring wildfire detection technology to the communities that need it the most. And today, we're going to do just that by bringing a couple of presenters to you. The first one being Patty Ciesla, who is a wildfire mitigation expert, has a tremendous amount of experience working with all kinds of organizations, including multifamily communities, in identifying and helping to mitigate the causes of wildfires. She is the former executive director of the California Fire Safe Council, and we'll be speaking first today about strategies for keeping your multifamily community safe from wildfire. And then Dave Bursell, who is a vice president with MoviTHERM, will be talking about some exciting innovations in thermal camera technology that can be implemented to give you the earliest wildfire detection possible within multifamily communities. And without any further ado, I am going to turn it over to Patty to start.
All right, so getting started. I'm going to talk to you about a couple different things in two different sections. The first section is going to be a little bit of background on wildfires, wildfire causes and behavior, uh, different features of the wildland environment and the built environment that you want to understand to help build your community's wildfire mitigation strategies. The second section is going to cover risks of wildfires to homes, life, and communities, and doing risk assessments. And after the assessments, preparing your risk reduction plan and implementing the plan. So getting started. Obviously, structure fires are quite different than wildfires. Smoke detectors are pretty much in every building, and they are very effective in saving lives. So, this whole workshop is about the concept of detecting fires for early response and mitigation of wildfires so that we can capture the fire before it's gotten too large. So in structure fires, usually you have a quick response with multiple engines and you have enough water to fight the fire. Structure fires are usually limited to a single structure and they are a personal disaster rather than a community disaster. Structure fires can be the cause of a wildfire. So something to keep in mind is that wildfires don't necessarily start way out in the far open space, but they can start right up next to your community. This is a time map showing the progression of a wildfire in Mendocino, California. And you can see that initially the wind is blowing in a certain direction. Each one of these colors is one day. This fire went on for a really long time and the wind shifted. Initially, it was blowing east, and then it started blowing to the north. So something to keep in mind is wildfire behavior changes during the course of the fire. Also, out-of-area responders often come to help assist with fighting the fire, and they may not be familiar with your community. So some of your mitigations are going to be oriented towards out-of-town firefighters. The first order of action in a wildfire is to get people out. Law enforcement is going to be involved in evacuations. Many counties and communities have an alert and notification system and zones set up for evacuation already planned out. So you want to find out if that is the case for your community. Evacuations are really an important thing to think about in your wildfire mitigation plan. That's where most people die in wildfires, is actually on the roads, not necessarily in their homes. Wildfires are usually caused by people or their things. This is the origin of the Valley Fire. It's a homeowner put in a hot tub, did their own wiring, did a really bad job. The connectors arced and started a wildfire that killed 4 people. The people just adjacent to this home did not get notified that there was a wildfire. And so that's something to think about, is these things can be ignited right around you. We had a wildfire started by some welders who were working on a gate um, outside the defensible space of the home, and the sparks from the welder ignited a fire at the bottom of their driveway. We do have a wildfire season. It's getting shorter and shorter. It depends where you live, when it starts and when it ends, but it's generally when fuel moisture is low. And due to climate change, we're getting hotter and hotter days, more and more hot days, and that means a longer and more dangerous wildfire season. Wildfire behavior is affected by the weather at the time. Wildfires also generate their own winds. So that's something to think about, is that the wind where you're at when the fire starts may be different after the fire has gotten a bit of steam on. The type and density of your natural vegetation and your landscaping is going to affect wildfire behavior, how wet it is, whether you irrigate or don't. And also, once homes start burning, they are fuel too. And so if your homes are close together, if they're less than 30 feet apart, you've got problems with structure to structure progression of the fire. And if your community is on a hilly area, the topography is going to drive the fire behavior, as the fire is going to want to move upslope. You can mitigate wildfire behavior by doing vegetation management and reducing the amount of fuel on the ground. Even underneath the trees, you don't have to remove all the trees. And you can do these mitigations along the roads and within the community, between the homes, as well as a perimeter type of shaded fuel break, and integrate that with defensible space right up to the homes. Obviously, we want to detect wildfires before they get large and before they get close to the things we care about. In California, we have wildfire cameras mounted on utility poles that scan and look for smoke, and that helps increase the response time or decrease the response time so that firefighters can get to the fire faster. Wildland environment characteristics that you want to consider is what type of natural vegetation do you have in and around your community. Even an ordinary suburban community is going to have vegetation planted and irrigated or not irrigated, and any vegetation is going to be considered, if you've got a fire in it, it's going to be considered a wildland fire. Different types of vegetation, whether you've got conifers or oaks, and how much you've got vegetation intermixed with the homes makes a difference. So just keep that in mind, that for wildfire, you want to really consider the vegetation characteristics. You also want to look at your built environment characteristics, where you have assets at risk. So that is not only homes, but also schools, hospitals, commercial areas. You want to think about the things that you have to lose and how to protect them, and the assets that you have in your environment that you would use as part of your mitigation strategy, or that you would want to address in your mitigation strategy. So is your road network adequate? Do you have good water storage? Do you have backup power supply or communication supply or networks? What if your power goes out? Does everybody's phone die? So you want to think about the built environment characteristics in your wildfire mitigation risk assessments and planning. So in this section, I'm going to go over your community's specific risks and how to assess them, build a risk reduction plan, and implement that plan. So, obviously, risks to life and happiness. People die and are burned in wildfires, and life protection is the number one priority in wildfire mitigation. We don't want to lose lives. We also don't want to lose everything that we own and cherish. One of the tragedies of wildfire is that it can cause homelessness, and for many people, when a wildfire destroys a community, everybody becomes homeless instantly. And this is a picture of Paradise, California, where 81 people died and thousands of people lost their homes. Um, People get shotgunned out into the community around where the fire burned and beyond. These people retreat to their parents, their friends. They go into hotels, and it's a long, long time before people come back. In my community, we lost over 600 homes, and it looks like only a third of them are ever going to be rebuilt. Um, think of all the people that have left and aren't coming back. And it's a big effect to the community. So, lots of reasons to try and prevent wildfire because it's very hard to recover from a wildfire. This website, make a note of the URL there, readyforwildfire.org. It's created by CAL FIRE, and it has a lot of really good information for both homeowners and community leaders on how to prepare for wildfire. Some things that you can do as a community leader is you can help start a Firewise USA program. These programs are intended to engage residents in reducing wildfire risks. It's very much a grassroots kind of campaign, and it takes the burden off of community leaders to do all of the work. The other thing you can do is create a fire safe council if you don't have one. A nonprofit organization that dedicates itself to wildfire mitigation can really help you protect your community. You can also quickly start an education program. It doesn't take a lot, and fire agency personnel can help you put on courses and determine what you want to do with your education program. Well, evacuation workshops are really easy to do. And don't require a lot of experience for people to set up, and they're usually very well attended. It's a good thing to get started with. You can also do defensible space workshops if you've got a lot of single family homes. Everybody's got to, buck up and own their responsibility for defending their own home. You can create an Ember Aware campaign using email newsletters, Nextdoor, social media, Facebook, whatever it is, and help engage your residents in learning about how homes are ignited. Because it's not usually by a big wall of flames coming in. It's usually embers dropping on their homes from a distant fire. And you can educate people on how their structures can be ignited due to the specific conditions. You can create an individual home risk assessment program. A lot of fire safe councils are now offering this, where volunteers go around and assess the properties and help guide homeowners in what they need to do to protect their home. It's a 2-day training, and once people are trained, the assessments only take an hour or two. The program comes with forms that the volunteer assessors can use. Pretty easy to start up and get going. And then you go through with the homeowner and you look at the different areas around the home and what features about that area need to be addressed or mitigated to reduce wildfire risk. So close up to the home, medium distance, further away, the different assessing the vegetation and The conditions are going to vary depending upon how far you are from the home. The 100 to 200 foot extended zone around homes is kind of like beyond defensible space. And often in communities, this can be not necessarily owned by the homeowner, but by the community association. So fuel reduction projects can occur in these areas that will protect the whole community. Once you do home assessments, you create your home ignition zone action plan, hardening the home to prevent the structure from igniting, and doing your defensible space treatments. You can also, once you've done a couple of assessments in a neighborhood, you can do a neighborhood fuel reduction plan pretty quickly. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge. You don't have to hire a bunch of consultants necessarily. Even if a local fire captain or fire chief can help you do this. Quick and dirty, and it's one of the steps you'll need to do for FireWise recognition. Getting a little more complicated, depending upon the size of your community, you may need to do a more formal community risk assessment. And there's two levels of that. But in those assessments, you're going to look at the different features in your community that make it vulnerable and where you have opportunities to mitigate wildfire risks. So you're going to look at whether the homes are all the same or they're, individually unique depending upon how your community was developed, how close the homes are to each other, the road network, the water infrastructure, whether you've got places that people can retreat to when a wildfire comes along, and then the topography and vegetation around your community and how it, creates risk for you. The other thing during your risk assessment, you're going to look at what in your community besides homes you want to protect. So schools, stores, this is the hospital in Paradise, California. Yes, the fire completely surrounded and passed through the area where the hospital was located, and they evacuated it. So you got to think about what is the plan for places where people are vulnerable and need to be protected during a wildfire. You're also going to want to protect your habitat in your wildfire risk assessment and risk reduction plan. So community wildfire protection plans come in two types, as I said. An informal community risk reduction plan is usually going to be anywhere from 10 to 30 pages. It's going to evaluate the community's risks and resources and identify actions that can be done to help reduce those risks. A CWPP is, in this case, it's for the city of Santa Rosa. They're often done by government agencies for the area that they have jurisdiction over. They can take a year or more to complete and have a duration of effectiveness from 10 to 20 years with an update process. CWPPs are required for many grants, but once your community has one, it can open up a lot of funding to help you do your mitigations. You're going to want to implement the projects you identify in your CWPP, picking the low-hanging fruit, doing the low-cost, high-priority items right away, and begin saving or seeking funds for additional programs and projects. Chipping programs are easy to do and don't cost a lot when you consider how effective they are. So if you have a community where single-family homes have each homeowner has responsibility for vegetation management, they can cut their brush and stack it out on the street, and then you can come through and chip it up. And this is a great way to help reduce risks within your community. You can also do a grazing program where you bring in goats or cattle to graze the brush and grasses around your community. Depending upon the size of your community, fuel breaks and evacuation route treatments might be needed, especially if your community is at the end of a long road. You may want to plan an evacuation route treatment so that people can evacuate safely. And you're going to want to reduce the fuel next to those roads when you have those types of fuel reduction projects. It keeps the road cooler so that you can actually drive through and leave the community even if the flames are occurring right along the road. And you're going to want to deal with your water system and make sure you have enough water stored to fight a wildfire. And if the power goes out, which it often does during wildfires, that you've got a backup system for pressurizing and delivering that water. Another thing that you're going to want to identify is if you want to install detection cameras and what type, and whether they'll be linked to, say, a private security service or your local emergency operations center, so that those that are responding to a fire know what is happening and where. And you also want to look at irrigation and misting systems, because knowledge is power, but action is more powerful. So you want to do something to help prepare your community in the immediate emergency, and increasing the humidity around your community is a really good idea for making it safer for people to come in and fight the fire, and for people to leave as well. So that was quickly my share of the workshop today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Great. Thanks so much, Patty. And now we're going to turn it over to Dave to learn more about MoviTHERM.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you, Patty, again for laying that groundwork. I have to say, looking at some of that imagery of what's happened there in California, really sends the message of how critical and how important this can be. So appreciate you putting that together, and Neil, again, for arranging this webinar. Neil gave an introduction to who I am already. David Bursell. I work for a company called MoviTHERM, which essentially stands for Motion Vision Thermography. And if you're not familiar with thermography, essentially what that is utilizing infrared camera technology or thermal imaging technology to assess the health or condition of something. In this particular case, we're assessing the health or condition of the surrounding environment, looking for a potential for fire, and trying to avoid that. So we call this early fire detection. And I'll go into a little more detail about infrared technology, how it works, to explain that component of it. We have a product at MoviTHERM that we call IEFD, or Intelligent Early Fire Detection. And I have a slide here, a lot of text, and I apologize for that. I'll try to distill this down. Essentially, what Intelligent Early Fire Detection is it's leveraging thermal imaging technology, cloud computing, and communications associated with the cloud to assess, again, the health or condition of an environment, looking for hotspot detection before even the formation of smoke or ignition, combustion, smoldering, and the different forms of combustion. So it's leveraging this technology in such a way to enhance awareness, situational awareness. Now, in my background, I've been working with thermal imaging technology for over 25 years, and the application of early fire detection utilizing thermal imaging is not new. It's been around longer than I was involved and have been involved with infrared camera technology. But we've seen a resurgence in utilizing the technology for early fire detection, thermal imaging technology, that is, most recently. And I believe the reason for that is multi-layered. First and foremost, the technology, infrared camera technology, is shown here in this slide, is becoming more and more accessible from an economy's perspective, meaning the cost of this technology has come down dramatically over the years, making it more accessible and more feasible from an economics perspective. The development of smart computing or on-edge computing has made it easier to connect multiple infrared cameras so that they can communicate together. And that is shown here in the form of an ITL gateway, which is what we call an intelligent thermal link gateway. And then finally, the developments of software, especially cloud computing software, has made it even that much easier to connect these cameras, record that data, and then set alarming conditions based upon the data that these cameras are viewing, are seeing. So in a nutshell, a system for early fire detection that utilizes thermal imaging is quite simple. And that's because of, again, how technology has advanced over the years, and also the cost of these components coming down dramatically, making it much more user accessible from an economy's perspective. But it's essentially three components: the cameras, the gateway, and the software. I'll go into each one just very basically, kind of at a high level. So when it comes to infrared camera technology, again, infrared cameras have been around longer than 50 years, but they've come down dramatically in size and in cost. And the advantage to utilizing infrared cameras, or sometimes called thermal cameras, for early fire detection is that thermal imaging sees hotspots. That's what we're looking for. We're trying to identify potential for ignition. And so we leverage cameras, and these are special cameras in that they don't just see thermal radiation, but they've been calibrated to measure temperature from that thermal imagery. So it's a non-contact measurement method. These cameras, they are available now in multiple wave bands, multiple resolutions. They have multiple lens configurations that you can choose from. They're ruggedized, so they can be installed in the harshest of environments. So they come in multiple flavors, as shown here on this slide. But the takeaway here is how infrared sensing compares to other technologies like aspiration, smoke detectors, fire suppression like sprinkler-based systems, and even firefighting, how infrared cameras can detect potential for fire very, very early on the pathway to ignition. So that's the key advantage of thermal imaging, is early. We're trying to detect things, when they're just warming up. And here's an example actually in this slide. I'm showing a pile of material. This happens to be a coal pile, but it could be a pile of wood product in a bulk yard. It could be a pile of waste. But what happens in these piles oftentimes is as they decompose, they start to heat up. And it's just through the natural decomposition process. If that heat is not allowed to escape, well, it just continues to get hotter and hotter and hotter to a point where you may have combustion. And that's what we're seeing with this infrared camera here. Some principles of thermography are as follows, and I have also displayed here on this slide a snapshot of the electromagnetic spectrum. And you study this in physics in high school, and they even study it now in elementary and junior high school, which is amazing to me. But what this shows here is what our eyes are tuned to see, the visible spectrum. And you see that here in that electromagnetic spectrum. When you compare what we see with our eyes compared to all the different forms of light that are available in the universe, our eyes are really only tuned to see a sliver of the light that is available out there. The infrared bands happen to be much broader and wider than what we see in the visible spectrum. The infrared bands are adjacent to the visible light bands. And because of this, really the only difference between visible light and thermal light or infrared light is the size of the waveband or the wavelength. They behave very similarly, meaning infrared light can reflect, it can transmit through, and it can also be absorbed like visible light. The takeaway here is our eyes are not tuned to see thermal radiation or infrared light. But fortunately for us, we have camera technologies available today that do see that thermal radiation or thermal light. These infrared cameras, the imagery is made up very similarly to like a visible digital camera. You hear about the megapixels of your visible camera. Infrared cameras operate the same way. We have pixels. The uniqueness to infrared cameras, and these that we use for early fire detection, is each individual pixel, and I've kind of illustrated that here by the grid that's placed on top of this pile that's a thermal image. That grid represents each individual pixel. Each individual pixel is calibrated to measure temperature. So it's like having, thousands of thermometers or thermocouples, or if you've ever used one of these spot guns, it's like having thousands of those pointed at a target, and you're extracting the temperature information from those targets. So what we do with that temperature information is we stream that temperature information from these cameras, and we take it into an intelligent device. This is the gateway. And this is an example of what we call the ITL gateway. And it allows me to connect multiple cameras. And in this case, I can connect up to 8 cameras. And if you look at the display, you see I get the little thermal images coming from the cameras, but I also get the temperature values. And I can set threshold alerts based upon those values. These gateways, they come in multiple flavors. There's an LTE version. That means it will work cellular. And that will allow you to connect to the cloud platform where you have even more capabilities. Or there's a network-based version. So if you already have a network in place, let's say you're not a remote installation and you have internet access right there where you're going to be monitoring, no problem. You connect your cameras to the network, you connect your gateway to the network, and you're off and running. It's that simple. You don't have internet? That's not a problem either. You get the ITL gateway with the cellular connection built right into it, and you connect to the cloud that way. Once you're connected, there's multiple things that you can do. Let's say you want to have a local alarm or a local alert go off if a condition is met. You start to see a hotspot. You can tie this into an audible alarm going off or a light. Or if you wanted to take it and get even more advanced, you could take controls from this gateway to like a PLC. And you could turn something on or turn something off or initiate a suppression system. But there's many things that you can do with this gateway. The real power, though, comes from the cloud computing and the cloud software that's available. And for MoviTHERM, we call it ITL Studio. Again, ITL stands for Intelligent Thermal Link. And the software that we have available, it requires no installation. You just have to have a login credential, and you can access the software from any smart device. You don't have to worry about operating system upgrades or, oh, I changed my cell phone. I'm on a new carrier or I've got a new, doesn't matter. As long as you have your login credentials, you're good to go. By leveraging the cloud, you can also have enhanced notifications through voice, through text, through email. And you can quite literally email a community if you wanted. Text the community, call someone. And that's because our software has no user license restrictions. It's unlimited user licensing. So if you have an installation for doing early fire detection, you can pull as many people as you want into that platform for notification purposes. I'm going to stop the presentation, and I'm actually going to share my screen real quick and show you what I'm talking about. All right. So hopefully you can see this. This is a screen view of a gateway. Now I'm located in the Boston, Massachusetts area. This gateway happens to be in Irvine, California right now. But all I need to do to log into this gateway is to input the IP address of the gateway, be on the same network, and I can access it. So I get, thermal images. These are live streaming images. I get the data coming from all the regions here, displayed here, all the max temperatures. If I have any regions of interest, which are spots or area tools on my camera, I can access that as well. And this is on the gateway. So by just connecting the cameras to the gateway, I have a certain level of monitoring that I can accomplish. And again, I mentioned earlier that this gateway has digital I/O, so I can program this digital I/O to trigger, let's say, an alarm or a light that goes off to tell me, oh, you may have a condition. All right, this screen here, it represents the Cloud Studio, or I'm sorry, the ITL Studio software. And what I'm seeing here is an overhead view of the area that I'm monitoring. It's actually a Google satellite view. These are my temperature plots from the cameras that are currently measuring. And here's the thermal images from those same cameras, but I'm now viewing this in the cloud. I can view this anywhere. I can view this from my phone. I can view it from a tablet. I can view it from a computer, anywhere in the world at any time. This is another way to view the data in the platform. I could impose the cameras and the imagery and the measurements from the cameras over a schematic, let's say, of the area that I'm monitoring. And what is so powerful about this is if my cameras happen to go into an alarm condition, it will highlight in this view where that alarm is. And I can share this view. I can share this view via text. And someone can receive a text message saying, hey, we have an issue here. You need to go explore. Hit the link, and they'll have a live view of what's currently being monitored. And again, you can share this. It's unlimited. It just depends upon how many people you put into the software and set up to receive text notifications. All right. So what I am doing here now is it may be kind of tough to see, but we have a light inside this. It's actually our server room in our offices in Irvine. And I've remotely turned on that light to create a heat source. So it's heating up, it's warming up. And this happens to be a visible camera pointed at the light, but you'll also see that there's a light pole in the image, and it's green right now. That's because no alarm. But when I hit the alarm state, what's going to happen is that light is going to change to red, indicating, oh, there it goes. It just changed to red. It's telling me you have an alarm condition. And that's because we've programmed this alarm to happen above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. If I go back to, let's say, that overhead view that I was showing earlier, you'll see now that this camera here, again, this triangle represents, it's a simulation, of course, but it represents what that camera is viewing. And it's telling me, guess what? You have a hotspot here. I'm also getting a phone call.
TL Studio text to voice alert. There is an alarm of type alert was raised by device IR camera 1 max temp all regions. Temperature greater or equal than 140.0 degrees. Had this been a real alarm, you would have been asked to investigate. Thanks.
So
you may now hang up or dial 1 if you wish to repeat.
That's the voice message that came in as a result of that trigger. And I also received a text, and I apologize that I need to find out a better way to show this, but I have a text message that came in, and there's a link. And I'm showing this on my camera. Hopefully you can see that. And if I hit that link, you may recall it was showing that heads up view earlier. Well, there it is. And I'm looking at that on my phone. So now I've received the text message. I've received the link. I hit the link, and it tells me you have a potential alert. I can see on the link where I need to go to investigate. So now I'll go and I'll do that investigation. All right, that wraps up my demonstration of ITL. And I know that was a lot of information in a very short time. So if there's any questions, we can answer those at the end here. And if things come up in beyond the webinar, please, we're available to answer any other additional questions. Neil, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. That was a great demo and certainly a lot of good information about the MoviTHERM solution for wildfires within multifamily communities like we're talking about today. So at this point, maybe Patty, if you want to just cover a couple of quick points, maybe a couple things that you feel would be important for people to walk away with from this webinar, to know about looking for potential areas of opportunity and mitigation in a community.
Yeah, so I think it's very exciting that wildfire detection technology has advanced as far as it has. Thermal and visible light cameras have been very effective in California in seeing wildfires and helping responders understand the situation before they even leave the fire station. And they're also useful in monitoring during a fire. So, if this is something that your community can afford, it's a great thing to add to your mitigation package. When you look at where your community vulnerabilities are, if you can set up cameras looking into the wildland around your property, that would pick up a hot spot, that's certainly something that's not all that new. In California, we have hundreds of cameras set up in the wildland areas that look out into open space and undeveloped lands, and they do detect automatically using an AI technology. They detect smoke, and at night they detect hot spots, the fire flame itself, and these are networked into the firefighting apparatus, if you will. So, I can see how Dave's technology would work if you've got a security company that helps monitor your community. You can, provide this detection information to someone who can then activate EMS and have firefighters alerted that you've got a hot spot, you've got flames,
Thanks, Patty.
and getting response to your community faster.
Great, thank you. So, Dave, maybe a quick thing that we didn't really cover was how easy these are to install. I think, the concern sometimes is that if you're in a community that's responsible for all kinds of things, infrastructure and roads and so forth, that they're not necessarily experts in wildfire detection and would be looking for something that is easy to install and maintain and so forth. Can you touch on that?
I can, yeah. I mean, it's the system is made to be as do it yourself as possible, honestly. And so it's really working with like yourself or someone like MoviTHERM to identify what area do you want to monitor. First thing we're going to do is we're going to recommend a camera, based upon the field of views and the distance to the targets. But once that's probably the most difficult part with regards to pre-installation. And then the installation itself, I mean, it's like I don't know, putting devices on a network, like even a home network, you just plug it in. So the cameras are what are called power over Ethernet. So you don't even have to run power to the cameras. There's network switches that have PoE or power over Ethernet. All you need to do is add one of those to your network. You can buy them on Amazon for like $30. Plug that into your network, plug your cameras into the network, plug your gateway into the network, and that's it. And then if you're remote, again, because there is an LTE or cellular-based gateway, that simplifies things even that much more. You're not even having to tie it into your network because the gateway will automatically connect to the cloud, connect to the software, and you're up and running. So it's it's very much like installing a Ring doorbell at your house or a smart switch at your home now. Very similar in that regards.
And thinking through it, in terms of scalability, some communities are only going to need potentially a couple of cameras. Some are perhaps much larger and require many more. Is there a limitation on the system, or is there any gating factor there in terms of scaling up to the number of cameras that would be needed?
There really isn't, Neil. I mean, the gateway will support one gateway supports 8 cameras. And if you need more than 8 cameras, you just add another gateway to your network.
So a question that came up is this something that we can have the fire monitoring company add on?
Yes. I mean, whoever that monitoring company is, you can connect that with us and we can make that connection. Yeah, with regards to the notification end, you can tie the monitoring company into that notification side of things. We have customers that even tie the local fire marshal, fire department into their notification stream. Uh,
Yeah, and the other thing that you shared with me, which I think is important, is that you can set it up in such a way that if there are people on the community engineering team, if you want them to get the first notification so that they can go look and see what the situation is before then, calling 911, bringing in first responders, that can happen. And I think as Dave was trying to show in the video, is not necessarily the best over this, but you actually get a video of the area in question. So very quickly, someone could look at that, identify exactly where that spot is, check it out, make sure that it's something that needs attention, and then call the fire department. In other communities where you may not have 724 support like that, it could just go directly to the first responders.
yeah. It's very easy to set up a tiered notification. And yeah, in today's presentation, time didn't allow to go in to show you actually how easy it is to set up an alert. But you essentially select the device, the camera, if it's a particular area that you're looking at, what that temperature threshold is, and then you designate the severity. Is it just for information purposes? Is it a moderate alarm? Is it a medium, or is it a high alarm? And so you can tier these alerts, and you can tier who they go to depending upon that severity.
Very good. Well, if you're anything like me, as soon as I exit these webinars, I have a million questions. So I'll be reaching out and providing resources to all of you if you have questions so that you can ask them, and we can provide feedback so that you have all the information that you need, either around wildfire mitigation in Patty's area or specific to MoviTHERM and some of the great technology that they offer. So thank you very much for joining us today. Very much appreciate your time. Thanks to Dave and Patty for joining us, and we will be in touch. And please do reach out if you have any questions at all.